feel like I met all my demons during those 10 days. And I feel like that's a lot of what taught me about what slow living is. And it's not what I practice now. I wouldn't call that sort of the joy of life, but it slowed everything down in that meaningful, deep place where all of your thoughts are going on,
Mhm.
and you realize where you don't want to be and you realize where you do want to be. You have a lot of thinking time. And I learned in that moment how to be with myself. And once
Mhm.
I learned how to be with myself, then I could do everything with a certain level of joy and a certain level of satisfaction. And you don't need the adrenaline rushes the same way in order to feel joy. And you don't need to think about what someone else is thinking about you and their perspective and perception of you in order to feel whole and complete.
Hi, everyone. It is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidel, and I am here with.
Christine Seidel, and together we have.
Chwynyn Vaughan.
Great. Welcome, Chwynyn. We're so excited to have you with us. We are going to be talking about slow living with Chwynyn today. But first, we want to go ahead and we want to share a little bit of information about a pod course from one of our past guests and future guests. She'll be joining us back in October. Her name is Joy Malik, and she is a marriage and family therapist. And the pod course is From Heartache to Connection: 6 Strategies for Growing Secure Attachment. Now, Christine, I took this pod course. Oh my goodness, it is so amazing. It's short, but it
Yeah,
is filled with information,
sure.
uh, especially about the anxious and avoidant strategies, attachment strategies. So, do you get a lot of clients that have those struggles, Christine?
Yes, and actually, a lot of couples come together that are anxious and avoidant. So you end up having a lot of that, polarization in relationships. So, most people as a collective are either anxious or avoidant if they don't have, the secure attachment. So for individuals and or couples, that presents itself in a lot of relationships. So that's exciting to know that she's done that. And she's such a wealth of information and just knows how to attune and attend to her clients. So I'm excited to hear more about it.
I am too, and I can't wait. She'll be with us in October, and she will be talking about attachment styles in couples. So I think if people can get a jump start with this pod course and then hear her when she's with us on the podcast, I think
Yeah.
it's going to make a huge difference. And she gives action steps.
Which is so key.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is. It's one thing to know it, it's another thing to do it, right?
correct.
Okay. And plus, you can diagnose your past partners.
Correct. Exactly. Right. Like, what better use of that information?
Exactly. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So once again, we're with Chwynyn Vaughan, and she is with Slow Botanicals. I'm going to share her bio real quick, and then we're going to start exploring this idea of slow living. I'm so excited about this. We all need this. I know I do. Okay, so Chwynyn Vaughan is the creator of Slow Botanicals, an all-natural organic skincare line. With a background in healthcare and design, her passion for natural beauty, knowledge of healthy skin, and a deep love of local botanicals combine to inspire and inform her soaps, creams, balms, and other products. Surrounded by her organic garden filled with vegetables, flowers, and healing plants, Chwynyn has embraced slow living and hopes to educate and inspire others to do the same. Okay, welcome, Chwynyn. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's good.
That's good. Okay,
The bio.
covers it.
I think the conversation will be more interesting than the bio.
Oh, you think so? I don't know. That's a great bio. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Can you define slow living for us, Chwynyn?
Well, I think slow living, it comes from slow food, and slow food was the antidote to fast food. So if you then relate that to slow living versus fast living and think of fast food, well, fast food is it's unwholesome, it's not nourishing, you're not thinking about what you're doing, it's not thoughtful, it's not giving you life and health. it's really as mindless living. And so slow living versus fast living. Fast living just really means we're going through the motions, we're floating through life. We're not thinking and choosing, we're not being intentional. Our souls and hearts, they're not being filled. And so I think slow living is really about slowing down your thoughts, deciding what you want, how you want to do it, how you feel fulfilled.
Mm.
And it's not about the big flashy adrenaline rush parts of life. It's really about all the little things you do every day. So anybody can have slow living because everybody's living, and everybody can pull more quality into their life and make more choices.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I think that's, really reflects that intentional, intuitive way of living that calls us back to check in with ourselves and see, do I have integrity with how I'm moving through my life, or am I just, and I love that comparison of fast food, versus slow food. Is it just substance? Is it just this mass to say that we have something to eat, or are we eating something that will really nourish us?
That's
So
right. Yes. And I think that as we nourish ourselves, we learn what feels good. And as we learn what feels good, we do more of what nourishes us. And it's this positive feedback loop that just keeps building and building on itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
More and more
Absolutely.
fulfilled. And yes. And the slow living is not about doing things slowly. A lot of people think that it's about doing things slowly. And you can be a really busy person with a ton of different things on your plate, but those things that are on your plate are all really well chosen.
Mhm. That's a great way to differentiate. It's not about being in, slow movement, but just being in alignment with what you're saying yes to, really, I guess, is kind of
Yes.
fundamentally what you're saying.
Yes. And saying no is a big part of slow living. There's a lot of no.
Yeah. I need to learn about that a little bit more.
That's a very good point, to that saying no that's
Yeah.
the foundation, right?
Yeah.
Saying an authentic yes and an authentic no. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's also just being really aware. I mean, I think there's that saying, she can't see the forest for the trees. And I think part of slow living is that you get to see the forest and the trees.
Oh, I love that.
You have a big picture vision of how you want to be in your life and what you want it to be. And then you have all the small details that are your life and what you're noticing and observing and choosing to live out, that makes it the trees that make that forest.
Yeah, I
So
love that description. Yeah. Hmm.
What brought you to practicing slow living, Chwynyn?
well, I was thinking about that, and I think it all started. I moved around a lot as a child, and there was one period for several years where my dad gave up his job, he gave up his business, and we moved out to Northern Ontario, and that's a province in Canada. And my parents bought this beautiful log house, and it was in a very, very isolated area. And so it was really cheap, but really beautiful because nobody lived there. We lived like in the rural route two of a town of 500 people. So you can
Wow.
imagine it was
Yeah.
really, really isolated. But our house, the back of our house is the forest, and in front of our house is our garden. And then just below that was a really big river that was more the size of a lake, but a river with a big beach. And then out in that, you could see there was like sort of natural small islands where there was wildlife living. So all the time I was immersed in this experience of really what was slow. And so if you wanted to have joy and happiness and be stimulated, you had to notice all those small things all around you and slow down and listen for the bird song and get excited about loons mating, and which is this whole synchronized dance they do, and get excited to go pick blueberries. And it's just, it was so fulfilling as a child that I think I spent my whole life, once we moved, wanting to get back to that place in myself. And so it was created then, and I knew what felt good to me. And so it was, as I got older, living the fast life, growing in suburbs, living in cities, there was a part of me that wanted to have that experience again. So I think that's where it came from. And also that combined with when I was around 18, I decided that I didn't want to live a life of regrets, which meant that I had to also be clear on what I was choosing.
Wow, how amazing to have that at 18, right? Like that conscious awareness of I don't want to move through regret. But I think that experience in childhood, in childhood we're so open to receiving what feels right to us, and we can
Yeah,
actually hear that whisper of
that's true.
authenticity to be
Yes.
able to like pull that experience and be like, yes, this is life that feels so good to me.
This is who I am. Yeah, I
Mm.
think that we probably all even decided what we were going to do with our lives when we were children. And we came
100%. Yeah, we had to take a lifetime of adulthood to get back to it.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So Quentin, how do you think slow living impacts like personal growth and healing work?
Well, I think it impacts it dramatically. This brings to sort of a memory of working on an organic farm when I was 20 and having to weed for about 9 hours straight for 10 days in a row. And, that's real drudgery. It's time where you're not stimulated and just sitting there and having to be caught up in my own mind and having to start to really notice what I was doing as, again, this really deep stimulation. This,
Mm.
and I feel like I met all my demons during those 10 days. And I feel like that's a lot of what taught me about what slow living is. And it's not what I practice now. I wouldn't call that sort of the joy of life, but it slowed everything down in that meaningful, deep place where all of your thoughts are going on
Mm.
and you realize where you don't want to be and you realize where you do want to be. You have a lot of thinking time. And I learned in that moment how to be with myself. And once
Mhm.
I learned how to be with myself, then I could do everything with a certain level of joy and a certain level of satisfaction. And you don't need the adrenaline rushes the same way in order to feel joy. And you don't need to think about what someone else is thinking about you and their perspective and perception of you in order to feel whole and complete. And so I think just that quiet time where you're doing something, and again, this is where slow living takes drudgery and it turns it into something really beautiful. So every
Mm.
day we have to wash the dishes. If while we're washing the dishes, we can be fully there and notice the texture and the print on the dishes that we've chosen. Because when we chose those dishes, we chose them because, like, wow, I really like this print. It's so pretty. It's so me. And then it's like so often we never look at it again, just in that moment where we bought it. So you're doing that drudge task of washing your dish, and you can take all the soulful, beautiful points of that plate, the print and the colors that you picked out, and absorb that and take it in and feel joy. So I feel like there's a lot of work that can be done in realizing how it's your choice if you're happy or not, and how to be happy or not in just the simple moments of everyday life. And I think that's where it becomes available to everybody too. It's not an aesthetic. It's not, am I wearing linen and dancing through the fields and having a great dinner under a plum tree with close friends. It's about the everyday moments of our life and how we pull the most out of that to be in the space we want to be in.
That's so beautiful. And, really what I kind of heard was that, the coming back to self, the healing doesn't have to be this huge production where we have to go to these, retreat centers for, 3 months and eat, pray, love, and make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on our social media. That the healing and coming back to slow living actually occurs in simplicity, like the simple withdrawal of life, but in the discipline of doing that simple act, or mindfully having the discipline to do that. Because that the 10 days of pulling weeds is such like it's almost like you were forced to be with yourself, to withdraw back to yourself, like the calling back. But
Yes.
the simplicity of pulling the weeds and the discipline of having to do that every day is really the rhythm that was created to hear that.
Totally. And I was drawn to go do that 10 days on that farm, right? That fulfilled this vision I had of what I wanted my life to be like. And then you're in it and you have a choice in it to either run from it because it's really hard to live your vision. It
Yeah.
sounds a lot easier usually than it actually is in that moment. So you can go through it or you can run away from it. And that's part of those details that build the life that we want to live.
Absolutely. Wow.
Well, and it's the quote, like, what do you do before enlightenment? You cut wood, carry water. What do you
Right.
do after enlightenment? You cut wood and carry water.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
That's
I mean,
totally,
you do the same, but you do it different.
yeah.
Your approach is different. And thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that, because I think so often when people think about slow living and, getting back to the basics and, no longer multitasking,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Making sure that they're very present in the work that they're doing, that implies that they no longer get to do the things that they want to do, where it comes to building a career, having, family time,
Yeah.
all the things, because, well, I'm supposed to slow it down. It just
Yeah.
means that you get to do the same things, you just get to do them better.
Exactly. And much better. Yeah. Much, much better. Yes. Exactly what you want to do. And, multitasking too. Sometimes there is a bit of multitasking, but it's not the way we usually see multitasking. So, for instance, if you are, you live in the city and you have to take the bus to work, you know, you don't have a lot of money and you're living that way, well, you can take knitting needles on the bus. So you're multitasking, but really what you're doing is you're creating an environment for yourself where you get to slow down while you're doing what you have to do, which is the bus ride to work. So there is a multitasking in that way where you find a way to make each moment fulfilling, even a moment that wouldn't have been fulfilling if you just say scroll down your feed on the bus. You can spend your time doing that, or you can spend that time, if you like to knitting, or you can even have a journal and be writing, but making use of that time in that way.
Well, and I think even, as a collective, previously we've been all about being productive and producing and consuming, right? Just this external way of experiencing our life. And I think that there's a shift within a lot of us that are saying, that hasn't really been satisfying, that every single moment has to be in producing something or consuming something, but that these moments can actually just be moments that feel joyful in the mindful decisions we make around them. Even if we still have to be somewhat busy, going to work, coming home from work, those moments you can still curate that beauty within that.
Yeah. And I think you said something in there, and I'm not sure what it is now because I was really listening to you, but it brought up for a second. I was thinking about when you talked about also the question about work on yourself through slow living. And that comes back to the word no. And so I think there's also a really important component there. That's also a really difficult component, part of that ego work, like you talk about, because when you're fulfilling yourself and you're saying no, you are also isolating yourself. And so you're doing what's really meaningful. And if that's slow, it's things that other people don't notice. And so you say go to a party, and suddenly part of the ego work is you're not very exciting. People say, what's new? And what's new is that, there's a new pollinator in your garden that you noticed today. And that's like the most thrilling thing that happened, but it means so much to you, and they're saying no, and people thinking that also that they don't matter to you when they do, but you have only so many hours a day in a day. And I'm sure as business owners, you guys have this all the time. You have to say, no to social situations because you're building your businesses, but then people think you don't care. And you also have to be really, really willing to face yourself on how that feels when less people are calling you and you're less exciting at a party and you know, it is isolating too.
Yeah. And kind of, addressing maybe, for some people who have some of that codependency, spectrum of wanting to people please, and understanding that you have to sit in the discomfort of people not being really happy that you're saying no to honor something that comes back to slow living. And, like you said, it can be very isolating when you start to hold, space for yourself and have to say no, that, you have to be okay with how people feel about that.
Yeah, definitely. So that is definitely part of the work, I'd say, of slow living, is accepting how other people see you,
Mhm.
accepting that they don't necessarily understand you anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah, and accepting that you are not going to have a ton of friends, and
Mhm.
because you can't fit that in
Yeah.
when you're doing the deep work of your life,
Mhm.
you
Very
know.
true. Yeah.
So that's the harder
Being
parts.
able to create that world requires that you first have to define your values.
Yes.
And so being able to decide, okay, right now my values are personal work, their professional work, family life, perhaps, you know, other, your garden, as an example for you, Quentin.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about how you define your values and how other people can, ask themselves those same questions?
How I define my values. Well, I think it's it's really going in and feeling on a physical level how things make you feel. I think, there's that test they talk about of when you ask yourself a question, do you sort of go in this position, or not a question, you make a statement. Do you go like this, or do you contract inwards? And that tells you how you're really feeling. So I think it's a lot of moving in, feeling your body physically, feeling how every emotional situation makes you feel and how every physical situation makes you feel. And then slowly from there, if you don't know what your values are, I think your values become clear because it's so tangible. And then, of course, always, noticing how you make other people feel around you with the choices you're making, because we don't live in a vacuum. And so when you have these value choices, they also have to do with other people. So how are the choices that I'm making that make me feel great? How are they making the people in my family feel, though? And that becomes part of that value system as well. And then taking the time to do things like journaling, which is, again, getting in touch, and it helps you understand the meaning. I think all of these things help you to develop your value system.
Mhm.
And for me, the biggest thing is like, do I feel kind with what I'm doing right now? So
Mhm.
I think that's a big thing too, like what, because when you slow down, you sort of notice how you feel about how you interact with other people, because it's not just rush, rush, rush. You're being present, and it's like, am I being kind right now? And
Mhm.
if that kindness isn't there, then it doesn't fit with the value system. If the kindness is there, it fits with the value system. And so that also then, that has an impact on everything we do, like what we eat, how we move around, how we talk, all of these things when we're led by that kindness.
Mhm.
That's part of determining each of our value systems.
Yeah.
Christine, when a client comes in and you're trying to help them really focus in on what's important in their lives, what are their values? Can you talk a little bit about first steps that you take to help them identify?
Mhm. Well, I think they're just almost exactly, like Quinnen just expressed. The first thing is to, in some way, when we journey back to self, we have to withdraw in some way, shape, or form, which is coming back to the body and being very aware of how our body responds, like viscerally responds to certain things that we're saying yes or no to. And, you can start creating space in your life for that withdrawal, whether it's a time every day that you spend kind of like processing through, where you're at, what you have to do, and seeing, is this a yes or a no for me, really? As I check in with my body, am I, like Quinnen said, opening up, or am I closing down when I look at my response to this? And so really coming back to that withdrawal of intuitively checking in with yourself for that yes or that no as you scan across what you're being asked to respond to, whether it's, energetically having to physically go and do something or emotionally be available for something. Your body has all of the real responses that you need to have. So I would always tell a client to create space in their day for that alone time with themselves to check in on it. And then the same thing, as you start defining your values or you see your values, look at the people, the small circle that you've said yes to being your family or your support system, and how did those answers impact them, right? Because something may be a yes for us, but it may require us to be gone for 2 weeks. And that may not be a yes for the people that may need us, like in that moment of time, right? So then taking time to find congruence between your maybe a yes and then the system and support that you count on and they count on for you. And then, are you moving through these yeses more and more with joy or a sense of kindness or gratitude, because that's really the vibration we want to move through in life, and that we all deserve to feel is joy and gratitude. And when we feel that, we are so filled with kindness and respect for everybody. We don't need to project any type of anger or fear or lack or scarcity. We just start moving through life freely and easily, even in things that may be difficult. We are able to curate and hold that gratitude because we are moving more slowly and more intentionally on the things that truly do matter to us. So therapeutically, I would really advise my clients to do the exact same types of steps that Chwynyn, is encouraging us to take back to slow living. So
I think calming our nervous systems is one of the best benefits of slow living. Don't you agree, Chwynyn?
I completely agree. Absolutely. I think that when you can sit with yourself and you can sit and look around and observe, because I think slow living is a lot of observation that happens, because you're observing what you do, you're observing what's in front of you, you're observing the people around you. You're very aware, but it's not in that hyper aware way that causes you pain. It's not that. It's something really healthy and something. It's a philosophy of slowness as you move through a busy day, and I think that really it makes a health. I don't know how else to put it. It's just really healthy. And I think it takes away those feelings of scarcity. You talked about scarcity. I think that when you're deriving so much from every moment, that sense of scarcity goes away. And it also gives you lots of moments to reframe everything. Something bad happens, it's so easy to jump into that gratitude because there's just other small moments around the corner that are fantastic, because there's just the day's full of fantastic small moments. And it doesn't mean that nothing goes wrong, because it does. It doesn't mean that the people around you don't impact you, because they do. But I feel like the bounce back is much quicker. The resilience is much greater.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, Lisa, to your point about the nervous system, and, Chwynyn, what you were kind of saying is, the observation, having your nervous system constantly activated, is not just impacting you, it's impacting everybody around you, your relationships, your space, the chaos of a dysregulated nervous system is felt through all the ripples. And so I think slow living, that withdrawal back, allows your nervous system the ability to start rooting itself and becoming very grounded. And then as you move back into, you come out of that withdrawal and you're interacting with your relationships, they also get the benefit of that rooted, grounded nervous system, because they compare themselves, their nervous system to your nervous system. And so, the ripple effect of this work is felt, through many, many layers of relationships and even generations. If you can start doing that now, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's really, really true.
Mhm.
And I
Definitely.
think being able to slow down enough, like you said, Quinnan and Christine, to feel into your body, it also lets you know when a season has cycled through and you're
Mhm.
ready to step into a new way of living. I think so often we're so busy, like I've started down this path, I've committed to this path, I'm going to do this, no matter what, just do be achieved, right, Christine, as you say so beautifully. And there's times when we've completed a cycle. That
Mhm.
part of our life is we've learned everything we needed to learn. We're ready to move into the next layer and the next level of
Yeah.
a new cycle. And if we're going at 100% speed, we don't feel it.
Yeah.
We don't know that the cycle has ended. And so slowing down, being present, being in tune with your body, I think lets you know when it's time for something new.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that's like, you're talking about the seasons of life, and that really mimics the seasons of the year. And when you're slowed down, you notice all those seasons of the year. And as you learn how to notice the seasons of the year around you, you learn how to notice the seasons inside of yourself. And you see every year everything is born, it blooms, it dies, and it doesn't become so scary because you just realize that's part of being alive, that you're going to go through these. And you might keep circling it around the same ones over and over again through your life in slightly different variations, just like the year goes around in slightly different variations.
Mm.
And I think, and it becomes, you're not scared of that change because that's just normal,
Mhm.
you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
There's so much, such a nature is such a metaphor for, our own healing and growing process, right? And so how does nature kind of influence what you're doing with Slow Botanicals? I'm sure everything, but
Well, I mean, and right there, I mean, that I think a big part of what you said about how nature has all these metaphors and it helps us. But I think the reason is that we're part of nature. We're not separate from nature. So that's the biggest thing, is just really being a part of nature rather than being beside nature or outside of nature, you know.
or just
And
observing nature, yeah, but that you are rooting
and
yourself too. Yeah.
yeah, and I'd say like with the botanicals that I use, they work so well because we have evolved to be with these plants forever, on every level. So again, we're not outside of nature. Nature is a part of us. And although we live in often in these cities that are very separate from what nature is, our bodies still crave nature on every level. Our psyches crave nature. Like the best music, like that makes you feel the most alive and beautiful inside, is birdsong, because that's the music we heard for, forever. And then our bodies physically, all the plants and flowers that grow, it's always amazing to me how they they all have exactly what we actually need, how we evolved and developed together. And
Mhm.
so, and then just, to have a cup of coffee in a garden, and just to have your eyes open and your ears open and the fragrance while you have that, while you look at the plants around you, that's the most blissful moment of the day.
Mhm. Mm. And that's where
you know
you actually, are open to so much of the wisdom that you already contain. We are
Mhm.
always trying to overthink ourselves into a decision, or, if I think about this more, if I talk to more people, I'll get the answer.
Yeah.
But really, it's that withdraw, looking, being, experiencing nature, where we can access that intuitive wisdom and that authority that
Mhm.
has all of the answers. It'll say a yes or a no very clearly.
And a lot of it you don't even know is happening. It's happening on such a cellular level. Like they say, if you have a heart attack and you go into the hospital, if you're put in a basement room without a window, you will most likely die. If they put you in a room where you're overlooking some trees, you're probably going to have a really high survival rate. And you're
Wow.
not actively thinking about that. That's not
Mhm.
a problem you're trying to solve. That's just your whole body is actually responding to that, because that's
Yeah.
what we're meant for.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so I think that psychological healing helps in the same way.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and the
Mhm.
answer just pop into your head too, like you say. You have a problem, you stop thinking about it, and that's when you get the answers.
Yeah, we stop working against ourselves. You start working with ourselves. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah,
I
and
love
I
what
got incredible joy too in just going out and being with the flowers and harvesting them and listening to them.
Mm.
There's just something so wonderful about working with things that are real.
Yeah.
You know, and watching, planting a seed and watching it grow and nourishing it and then picking it and then making something out of it that then nourishes myself in a different way and nourishes other people. Just all those cycles happening.
Yeah.
It
That's
feels
beautiful.
amazing.
I need to
Yeah.
maybe talk to my therapist about my green thumb then, because I'm struggling to keep any of my things alive in my yard and in my container.
Well, there's so many facets that go into that. It could even just be your soil,
Yeah,
it might
that
not be you.
probably is a lot of it. Yeah. But it's funny because I hear you talk about that, and it's just like there's so much beauty, even if you can't curate that in your own yard or your own space, to listen, it sounds like such poetry to even just hear about people talk about the flowers and the trees, even just talking about it or listening to somebody, seeing it in art, even that has a place for us to reconnect to, that you don't have to
Yeah.
have the rural property
No.
in a place where you can run barefoot. That's not accessible to everybody, but we can all access the beauty of it.
Totally. And that's the thing that I felt really guilty about when I moved to where I live. Be like, oh, I get to have this garden and not everyone gets to do this. And I just feel like, oh, like I shouldn't be able to have this when other people don't have this,
Yeah.
And yeah, but yeah, we can take nature in other ways.
I love what you said about it could just be the soil, because isn't that symbolic, right? We can take it all back to it's always the soil.
It's
Yeah.
always the soil,
Right? It's always the soil that helps us
and
grow.
and you
Yeah.
can always amend the soil.
Yes, you can. Yes, you
Oh,
can.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
always building my soil. Yeah.
what do you offer as a way of advice for people who want to explore this slow living movement? Like someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm really busy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I don't even know where to start. What is the first thing you would tell them, Chwynyn?
First thing I would say, I think that I would say find a way to find one thing that you do every day that either you really can't stand doing that you have to do, or that really, really brings you great joy. Pick either of those, and just every day when you do that one thing, notice how it makes you feel, and then just try to deepen your experience with it. So if you hate cooking, try to imagine while you cook, because you have to do it, that what you're doing is going to nourish the people around you, that it's going to give you health, that as you do it, there's a sizzle that you never noticed before. Notice that sizzle, notice the scents. Just really jump as deep into that task as you can. So that's whether you can't stand it or you love it. And I think the extremes are really helpful, because I think it's in the extremes that we really notice, and then we can bring it into the less extreme parts of our life. But that's what I would say, is just jump in as deep as you can. You can even set a timer for 15 minutes of that moment when you're, say, cooking a meal, and for those 15 minutes, you have to dig in really deep, and then you can just relax and not think anymore about it. But that's what I'd say. Just start small and just take as much experience out of it as you can. And even if that also means noticing what you don't like about it, as part of that. Don't cut off any of the feelings you're having, while at the same time knowing that your goal is to savor it,
Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea of feel it all. There are no bad emotions, right? It's the label, it's the labels we put on it of good and bad, but there's
And
nothing.
then and what we let them then do to us, how we react to those or respond to them, yeah. Because ultimately, I mean, I really feel like ultimately we live with other people, and so we do have to watch our reaction to those bad things and how we're going to impact others around us, and also how we're then going to go take that. Are we going to have gratitude for that awful thing that happened and take the best out of it?
Mhm.
Or are we going to be really upset by what happened and then take the worst out of it? So I think it's also that, that's what I meant with like the forest and the trees. Your forest, you want your forest to be a healthy forest. That
Mhm.
means not denying that unhealthy part, but then trying to see how you can transform that to making you ultimately healthier
Yeah.
or more whole.
hmm I think that kind of goes to, especially with those uncomfortable emotions we may experience, or that moment that is not our favorite moment. If
Yeah.
we don't just experience it and allow ourselves to move through it, we continue to ride it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
that's where we get very stuck. Whereas if we find ourselves moving through it, on the other side of it, we tend to find something positive ultimately, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we avoid getting to that place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. And this is a whole other topic, but I know the worst thing that ever happened to me became the best thing that ever happened to me because I went through it and I felt it and I experienced it and I didn't numb it. I just went. And yeah, on the other side of those discomforts is the most beautiful space that we can ever have because we take so much with us through that
Mhm.
going through.
We do.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we would love to have you come back and maybe explore that really bad thing that happened that turned into something because we like to talk about everything here.
Totally.
Christine, do you have any other questions for Chwynyn? I love this conversation. Do you have any other follow-up questions for her?
I don't, but I just so appreciate the conversation, and this conversation actually was just very soothing and very rooted in feeling authentic and coming back to that intuitive part of us that leads us with integrity and authenticity. And I think that really is kind of the foundation of what you're teaching people through slow living is to move through your life with that integrity, that at 18 you had the wisdom to say, I don't want to have regret. And we get to make that choice every day. It doesn't matter where you have been, you get to make that choice in the small ways every single day. So I so appreciate the conversation and the bringing of nature into it, because there is such beauty and rhythm that we can learn on how to live through watching and being part of nature again.
Yeah. And thank you for sort of using those words, authenticity and integrity, in that, because yeah, I don't know, just hearing those words felt really good, that that's what slow living really is about. And that's something that we all can use more of in our lives.
We can,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you for having me on.
It does feel very calming. I keep repeating the idea of gentle empowerment.
Hmm.
That's the way it feels. I feel gently empowered. So
Yeah.
thank you, Chwynyn, for that.
Thank you.
You brought that gift here, and I
Thank
know
you.
listeners are going to feel that as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, if people want to learn more about you and the products that you sell online, how can they find you?
I have a website and it's slowbotanicals.com. I also write a blog there. And so I'll talk about skincare, but I can never get away from insights and psychology while I'm writing about anything that's has nothing to do with psychology and personal insights. So yeah, so those are the best.
But yet it does. But yet it does.
Exactly.
We will put your information in the description notes as well, so that people can find you. And we would love to have you join us again in the future.
Oh,
Thank you so
that'd
much.
be wonderful. And thank you so much for having me. It's great to
Oh,
see you.
our pleasure. All right. Thank you, everyone. And go do a little slow living. I'm going to. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye.